What happens if you refuse Australia's digital ID in 2025? It's a question millions of Australians are starting to ask, but few are getting a straight answer to. The government says it's voluntary. Tech experts call it the future. Privacy advocates warn it could reshape your rights. So where does that leave you? If you choose not to sign up for digital ID, like the new MyID app, will you still be able to access Centrelink, Medicare, your bank, or even renew your driver's license? Or will saying no quietly lock you out of everyday life in an increasingly digital Australia? Today, we are cutting through the confusion to reveal exactly what's at stake if you opt out of digital ID in 2025, and why voluntary might not mean what you think it does. Let's start with the basics. Digital ID is a secure, government-backed system that lets you prove who you are online without handing over physical documents. Instead of emailing a scan of your passport or waiting in line at a service center, you use an app like MyID to verify your identity instantly. The system uses facial recognition, encrypted document checks, and two-factor authentication to confirm you're really you, and then lets you share only the bare minimum of information needed for a specific task. Need to prove you're over 18? Your digital ID can do that without revealing your address or full name. Applying for a tax refund? Log in securely without passwords or paper forms. On the surface, it sounds like a win. Faster service, less fraud, more control over your data. And after massive breaches like Optus and Medibank exposed millions to identity theft, it's easy to see why the government is pushing hard for change. But here's the catch. Convenience often comes with hidden trade-offs. And in 2025, those trade-offs are becoming impossible to ignore. The Digital ID Act officially came into force on December 1, 2024. Since then, federal services like the ATO, Centrelink, and Medicare have already integrated the system. By late 2025, state and territory governments will follow, meaning things like driver's license renewals, housing applications, and even school enrollments could require digital ID verification. And by the end of 2026, banks, telcos, energy providers, and major retailers will be on board too. Now, the government insists this is all voluntary, for individuals, at least. There's no law that says you must download MyID or link your identity to the national system. You can still, in theory, use your physical driver's license, passport, or birth certificate to prove who you are. But theory and reality are two very different things. Because while you won't face fines or legal penalties for refusing digital ID, you will face consequences, subtle, systemic, and increasingly unavoidable. First, there's access. As more services migrate to digital ID-only portals, the traditional options are quietly being scaled back. Why? Because maintaining two parallel systems, one digital, one analog, is expensive and inefficient. Service Australia has already begun streamlining its online platforms around digital ID logins. Banks are testing digital ID for new account openings. Telcos are using it to verify SIM swaps and prevent fraud. If you're not in the system, you may find yourself forced into slower, in-person processes, or worse, hitting dead ends when trying to complete tasks online. Imagine this, you're applying for a small business loan. The bank's entire digital onboarding process is built around digital ID verification. You say you'd prefer to come in with your passport. They tell you branch appointments are booked out for 6 weeks, and even then, you'll still need to complete part of the process online. Suddenly, voluntary feels a lot like mandatory. Second, there's time. Without digital ID, everything takes longer. Manual verification means more paperwork, more waiting, more back and forth. In a world where speed equals service, opting out could mean you're treated as a second-class user, someone who's difficult to serve. That might not matter if you rarely interact with government or financial institutions. But if you rely on Centrelink, need regular Medicare claims, or are applying for housing support, delays could have real financial and emotional costs. Third, and perhaps most concerning, is the risk of digital exclusion. Australia's push for digital ID isn't just about efficiency, it's part of a broader shift toward a fully digital public infrastructure. Once the system is embedded across federal, state, and private sectors, maintaining non-digital alternatives becomes politically and economically unviable. We've seen this before. Remember when paper tax returns vanished? Or when in-person Medicare claims were phased out. What starts as optional often becomes obsolete within a few years. And let's be clear, this isn't speculation. The rollout plan is already written. Phase 1, Federal Services, done. Phase 2, States and Territories, rolling out now in 2025. Phase 3, Private Sector, coming by 2026. The infrastructure is being built right now to make digital ID the default. Not because they'll force you at gunpoint, but because they'll make everything else so inconvenient that compliance feels like the only rational choice. Now, what about privacy? The government promises strong safeguards. The Digital ID Act includes strict rules, data minimization, user consent, encryption, and oversight by the ACCC and OAIC. Accredited providers must undergo rigorous security checks. And in 2025, new amendments are being proposed to improve transparency and create better redress for victims of fraud. But critics remain wary. Even if your personal data isn't stored in a central database, every time you use digital ID, you create a trail, logging into Centrelink, then Medicare, then your bank. That metadata, over time, paints an incredibly detailed picture of your life. And while the law currently prohibits function creep, using digital ID for purposes beyond identity verification, laws can change. Emergency powers, national security claims, or future governments could expand its use in ways we can't yet predict. So where does that leave you in 2025? If you're an individual, you still have a choice, technically. You can refuse digital ID today without legal consequence. But that choice comes with growing friction. You might lose access to streamlined services. You might face longer wait times. You might be excluded from new digital-only platforms. And as the system becomes more entrenched, those frictions will only increase. For businesses and government agencies, however, there's no choice at all. If you're part of the Australian government digital ID system, compliance is mandatory. Fail to meet security standards? You could lose accreditation. Mishandle user data? You'll be investigated, fined, and publicly listed in compliance reports. The ACCC isn't playing around, and that pressure will inevitably trickle down to how services treat non-digital ID users. So, can you skip Australia's digital ID in 2025? Yes, but not without cost. The real question isn't whether the system is voluntary on paper. It's whether you'll still be able to participate fully in Australian society if you opt out. And as the months go by, that line between choice and coercion is getting blurrier by the day. This isn't about fear-mongering. It's about awareness. Digital ID has real benefits, especially for vulnerable communities, remote residents, and anyone tired of bureaucratic red tape. But it also demands a trade-off: convenience for control, efficiency for exposure. Before you decide, do your homework. Read the Privacy Act amendments. Understand what data MyID collects and how long it's retained. Know your rights under the Digital ID Act. And most importantly, stay engaged. Public feedback has already shaped this system, like the 2025 proposals for better fraud protections, and your voice still matters. Because once the doors close, they rarely reopen. Thanks for watching, and remember, in a world racing toward digital identity, the most powerful thing you can be is informed.